everyone for coming out. It's great to see you all. Just begin by, this is the Postgraduate Fellowships and Government Honors Program informational session. My name is Sienna. I'm here with Public Interest Law Career Services, along with Anupam and Mia. And thank you, ladies, for all the time that you've put into organizing and preparing for everything today. We also have two wonderful panelists here today, Marcia Tien. And Marcia is a Skadden Fellow with the National Origin, Immigration, and Language Rights Program at the Legal Aid Society, where she represents, educates, and advises low-income and limited English proficient workers who have been barred from equal employment opportunities. Prior to starting her fellowship, she clerked for the U.S. District Judge Marcia Petchman in the Western District of Washington. She has her JD from the University of Pennsylvania and her undergrad degree in international economics from Georgetown. So Marcia is here to speak about her experience with doing the Skadden Fellowship. For those of you that are interested in potentially pursuing that, she's a great resource and will be offering some insight. And we also have Stacy Osborne, who is a SCU Law 3L and currently going through the government honors process. She has an MA in linguistics from UCSD and is currently going through the process, so we'll be checking in with her about what it's like to actually go through this. So, let's get started. We're going to go through some information just about what fellowships are, what you should be doing, what the timeline is, and then we'll be checking in periodically with our two panelists about their personal experiences with going through the process and working as a fellow. So there are two main types of fellowships we're going to be focusing on today. The first is what we will be referring to as the postgraduate fellowship. This is sort of a number of different types of fellowships, but for the most part, when we're talking about postgraduate fellowships, they are term-limited opportunities, which just means that the fellowships tend to last about 1 to 2 years, and they are with mostly nonprofit organizations, and they are an opportunity that gives recent law graduates an ability to work in a nonprofit setting or work on a particular project, usually with a nonprofit. And then we'll also be talking about the government honors programs, which are with government agencies, obviously. So, the postgraduate fellowships, they tend to be with, as I mentioned, nonprofit organizations, but also with through education institutions. And then certain firms will have fellowships from within their firm. And then also entrepreneurial fellowships, such as the Echoing Green Foundation Public Interest Fellowship, which is a really cool fellowship where they allow innovators to develop projects and start their own companies and nonprofits, so they provide the funding for that. There are, sort of going through some of the opportunities of the different postgraduate fellowships. Opportunities with nonprofit organizations, Marcia will be able to speak to this. That are fellowships like the Skadden Fellowship or the Equal Justice Fellowship, which you'll be probably hearing mentioned over and over again. This is where funders provide funds to the nonprofits to be able to hire individuals to work on certain projects. So it's a great way to get your foot in the door at a nonprofit that may not otherwise have the funding to hire you and make yourself invaluable within that position so that they will hopefully keep you around once the fellowship finishes, because they do tend to be term limited to 1 or 2 years. Additionally, through educational institutions, Santa Clara Law has some fellowships that are provided to faculty who then hire students to work for them. The best way to find out if any of these fellowship opportunities are available are to talk to the professors. They're the ones that would have information about that. Law firms, additionally, will provide fellowships. They tend to fall in a number of models. Sometimes they will have a fellowship that is through their own firm, but you would be working on public interest work as an employee of their firm. Sometimes they will fund you to work for a nonprofit. And so you would be an associate for a specific term with their firm, but you would be working with a nonprofit to do a certain project. And then finally, as you mentioned, there are some opportunities through organizations that will fund you to start your own nonprofit or your own project. So that's when we say postgraduate fellowship, we're referring to that sort of blanket of opportunities, tending to be with nonprofit institutions. And then just some examples, organization-based fellowships tend to be like the ACLU. They'll hire fellows, so it's like a 1 to 2 year employment with the ACLU to work on a project with them. And then the project-based, which is the Equal Justice in Skadden, as I mentioned, it is funding to work on a project within a nonprofit. All right, and then the Government Honors Program, which we will also be speaking about. So these are, they give recent graduates the opportunity to work in government agencies. Often they can be sort of the only way to get your foot into the door to some of the federal and state agencies. For example, like the EPA or the FTC, they tend to hire out of the Government Honors Program. They're a great way to get your foot in the door to government jobs and to certain agencies that will only recruit attorneys from the honors program. Okay, so why you would want to get a fellowship. Fellowships are a great way to get your foot in the door into certain institutions. As we mentioned, the Government Honors Program, some agencies will only hire from the Government Honors Program, but also with the nonprofit fellowships, it's a way to get funding, which you can then take to the nonprofit so that they will be able to create a position for you within their organization. So it's also a really great way, if you have something that you're passionate about, something that you want to work on, a certain aspect of that you feel has not been addressed as well as you would like it to be addressed, it's a great way to be able to work within that issue that you feel like is not being adequately addressed by the resources that are already out there. You can basically create the perfect position for yourself and then get funding to be able to do that work. It's also a great way to get really good training, and because you are going to be creating a project through a nonprofit or with a government agency, it's a great way to get into some organizations and get really good experience and training. It can also lead to continued employment. If you've been with an organization for a year or two and doing great work, they're often really, they'll work hard to find a way to keep you there at the organization. It's also, it's prestigious. It takes a lot of work to get a fellowship, and so it looks really good when you're then pursuing other things that you were a recipient of a fellowship. It's an honor. Do either of you ladies have anything you'd like to add as far as the benefits of getting a fellowship, so maybe some benefits that you have had working within a fellowship?
Sure. I guess I would just echo the fact that the funding is really tied to you. So no, I don't think you're probably ever going to get a chance to go to an employer and be like, hey, you can't fire me because my money's coming from elsewhere, which means that you get to dictate what your project looks like. And I really think those opportunities are pretty rare and probably should probably not get used to it, but, and it's like, the benefit for me is that, you know, I have a fear of commitment, so a 2-year project is perfect, so.
That's a really great point. They can't really get rid of you. Okay. All right, so now that's why fellowships are great and why you want one, and we're going to transition a little bit into how to actually choose a fellowship and then apply for it. Okay, so we've got some steps, and then we're going to check in with the speakers and see how they weigh in on this. I think it starts with a self-assessment. So this is considering your goals, what you want to do, who you are, what will make you happy, where you want to live, all these types of things. And thinking about, as I mentioned, a fellowship is a unique opportunity to potentially serve an interest that you think is being underserved currently. So the first thing you want to do is think about, you know, who you want your clients to be, who you want to serve, who you want to work with, what kind of organizations you might be interested in working with, organizations that are maybe already working with certain issues that you're interested in, but maybe lacking in a more specific part of that particular issue. You also want to think about the kind of work that you want to do. If you want to do, you know, advocacy, policy work, or if you want to do direct client contact, those kinds of things. You also want to know perhaps when you want to be doing this, if you want to start directly after you finish school, or if you want to maybe get continuing education and then go back to do this project. Where physically you'd like to do it. You can work in California or out in, you know, Bronx, New York, or internationally even. There are international opportunities. Something to take into consideration. Of course, why you want to get this fellowship, and then how you'd like to work. If you want to be part of a larger team, or if you want to just sort of create something yourself and go it on your own. So those are the first things to be starting to think about, because a lot of times you have to create this project on your own, and then you're going to be working on it for 2 years. So you really want to make sure that you know what your goals are and what you would like to be doing for the next 2 years. And once you've sort of got an idea of that, then you want to begin to research what kind of opportunities are out there. This is opportunities as far as the actual fellowships that exist, and then also potentially the different nonprofits that you could be working with, or the different government agencies that you'd be working with. So, for research, does everyone here know what PSJD is? It used to be PS LawNet, now it's psjd.org. Are people familiar with that website? Okay. It is going to be on a future slide, but we have resources, and so it's on the handout that we handed out. But that's basically, it's a huge database of different public interest jobs and resources and fellowships. So PSJD is a great place to start if you want to look into the kind of fellowships that are available out there. So they'll have, you know, a huge long list of all the different organizations that offer fellowships, when the deadlines are, that kind of stuff. It's a great place to start your research as far as what is out there. And then also, of course, the networking side, or just hitting up people who have applied for fellowships and gone through the process. So we have 2 here. We do have also some other people that we've contacted that said they would be willing to talk to Santa Clara Law students about the fellowship process. So if you have a particular interest, please come see us afterwards, and we might be able to put you in touch with somebody who can give you some advice. You also want to, as I mentioned, research the organizations that are already out there that are perhaps working in some of the fields or issues that you might be interested in. See if they've had fellows before, which would make them much more likely to want to work with fellows again. And see what kind of organizations are out there that you may want to work through. Then it comes to the actual process. Once you know what you want to do and who you're thinking you would like to do it with, then you need to go through the actual process of submitting your application to get a fellowship. So then this process, we have written kind of what it involves. I'm sure most people are familiar at this point with applying for things through doing your job searches and applying to law school and all of these things. But the cover letter, resume, they're going to want to see a transcript, writing sample, and letters of recommendation, etc. So pretty similar to a job application in that sense, but then you're also going to have to do a lot of additional work, which is, at least for the project-based fellowships, you have to sell the project that you have thought of, that if you created what you want to do, why you want to do it, and who you will be serving by doing that project. So that is an additional aspect of the fellowship application, is that you really have to sell this project that you would like to work on and why somebody should be funding you to do this work for the next 1 to 2 years. Then once you've done the application, you'll go through a pretty intensive interview process. You may go through several rounds of interviews because they really want to know that you are the person that they should be investing their funds in, and then finally the outcome, whether or not you get the fellowship. And if you don't initially get it, it's not the end of the process. We had a panelist last year who had, the first time around, not gotten the fellowship that they wanted, and they just reapplied, beefed up their application, and got it the second time around. So if you do not have success the first time, it's not the end of the road. You can keep trying. Okay, so go back here. Marcia, do you have anything you want to add about the steps that you took in choosing an application and going through the actual process to share?
Sure, I just want to make sure people are actually applying for scholarships.
I'm sorry, I was wondering if you could introduce what Skadden Fellowship is and like where you work, how you get to know about it, just from there, and then you can talk about that.
Sure. I mean, people are interested in applying for fellowships or more interested in government. Okay. My name is Marcia Chendo, again, and I work for the Legal Aid Society Employment Law Center, which I think maybe some of you are familiar with the workers' rights clinics that happen throughout the Bay Area. And I applied for a Skadden Fellowship with not just the Legal Aid Society Employment Law Center, but a variety of different organizations. I think the process for me might be different than for you. I think there's probably 2 tracks for people who are really involved in extracurriculars and have been doing externships. That's always the best way to get into an organization, to get them to sponsor you for the fellowship process. So you'd need the organization to sponsor you, and then you can apply for the fellowship with Skadden, so it's sort of a 2-step process. Some organizations are like, sweet, you need a sponsor, we'll sponsor you, and then other organizations, like my organization, you would apply through their internal processes first, and then also get their sponsorship, and then apply for the Skadden. So depending on the organization, it might be really easy to get an organization to sponsor you, or it might be a little bit more difficult. If you have worked at an organization that has had a Skadden or any other sort of fellow, they probably would be interested in sponsoring your fellowship. I would, probably the easiest, the best recommendation for getting sponsorship in that is, do your work, don't mess up, and then they'll probably want to sponsor you, be a rock star at the organization. I ended up, when I first graduated from law school, I wanted to apply for a variety of fellowships where I went to law school, which is in Philly. And I got all them to sponsor me because I had worked there over the summer, or if I didn't have time over the summer, I worked for them during the school year. And it turns out that I ended up wanting to move to the Bay Area, where I had no contacts, zero. Which, if you are interested in an organization that you haven't worked for, I wouldn't discourage you from applying, because clearly that's what I did. I think it's just a little bit more of a hurdle. So one of the big take-home points I would say is volunteer or work in an extracurricular that involves an organization. It's really nice to be involved in student organizations, but it's also, hopefully you can get your foot in the door with an organization or with a student organization that's also involved with a nonprofit. So just so you get that attorney contact, so they'll know that you are, who you say you are, and you're not a flake and things like that. In terms of process for actually applying, I think the Skadden Fellowship is probably a lot different from Equal Justice Works. The Skadden Fellowship is basically, has a very defined process, and there's set interview questions and there's set essay questions that never changed and have not changed over the past 20 years. Equal justice works a little different in that you have to you sort of have to get some law firms to support your application as well. I think it's a little more of an informal process, but I have to admit that I didn't apply for the EGWs. I'm trying to think if any of this is raising any questions for you. I'm just sort of rambling at this point. Is that good enough?
I actually have a question. You said that there are set questions. Where can we find out what kind of questions they ask?
Well, the Skadden application is available on the Skadden Fellowship website. So
the questions are...
So the questions are already there, and then during the interview process, and everyone knows this, it's not like I'm giving you any advantage, anyone who's applying for a Skadden will go into the interview and the first thing that Susan Butler-Plum, I'm not sure, do you all know who Susan Butler-Plum is? She basically is in charge of the Skadden Fellowship process, and she has been since its inception. And she'll ask you, what's your project and why? And then she'll ask you, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years? And there's just a series of questions that are actually quite general. And I think, if you get her in the beginning, and you express your passion pretty, convey it in a way that's like not nervous and is clear. You're already above the curve. But if you also just want to look at the paper application, which happens before the interview, that's available on the website. So.
I actually have a couple of questions, actually. One for Stacy, since we're on the topic of discussing the different types of fellowships. Can you explain the Capital Fellows Program and how that's different? But before we get to that, could you explain, just sort of give us a timeline of how you applied and what you had to do in order to get the Skadden Fellowship? And then Stacy, can you talk about your process? Sure.
Depending on if your organization is more stringent about who they sponsor, like I had to apply in the summer of my 2L year with an organization, with ELC, and I applied for a bunch of other, and I actually recommend, probably if you guys are looking in the Bay Area, I would probably do that no matter which organization I was working with, because a lot of the Bay Area folks have this system sort of down, whereas I think in Philly it's a little haphazard. And they know the fellowships that are available, and it all happens in the summer. So all the organizations will look for who they're going to sponsor over that summer. And then you apply for that scholarship, or that sponsorship, and they'll go through an interview process, and they'll probably come up with a decision by the end of August. In September, you will submit, end of September, beginning of October, you'll submit your application to Skadden. And it's a joint application, so it's partially done by the organization, it's partially done by you. At that point, Skadden will decide who they want to give interviews to, and in more recent years, they've been more interested in giving interviews more widely. So it's kind of amazing. Susan Butler-Plum will fly all the way, across the country, like back and forth, doing like close. I think it was 200, but it might have been 100. But it was at least 100 interviews for these fellowships, and then you'll get your decision probably early in December, which is nice because then you can spend your second semester 3L year coasting. You guys aren't professors.
So why am I here? I'm here because I just submitted an application for the Capital Fellows Program, which is a government fellowship. How did I find out about it? This is a program you may have seen. You just have to have a bachelor's degree in order to apply for it. And so I remember seeing this when I was in college, and I had classmates who did it. So that's one nice thing, is I know it's been around a while, so I know it's established and what I'm getting into. It's a, as I said, government fellowship. There are different kinds of government fellowships. There's the Attorney General's Honors Program. That's a, I think, 2-year fellowship. This one, the Capital Fellows, can be 9 to 10 months. It goes over the academic year. This one, there are 4 different kind of subsets of fellowships. They have a Judicial Administration Fellowship, in which you get placed in different courthouses or in state or county judicial administration buildings, and you learn that aspect of the process, bettering access to the courts for people. There's also a Senate Fellowship, an Assembly Fellowship, and an Executive Fellowship where you get paired with someone in the governor's office. The application process is similar to what we have up here. They want to see transcripts. They want to see, they don't have to be official, which was great. Just had to cut and paste something from the internet and submit it. They wanted essays, 1 to 2. They want to know, the general. Tell us why you're interested in this fellowship. Tell us what you hope to get out of it. Some of them wanted a separate essay on policy issues. So they said, like, talk to us about 3 policy issues facing California and your proposal to address one of them. You need letters of recommendation and a resume, of course. So this particular fellowship is interesting because it's paired with Sac State. You get, as part of your compensation, course credit in a couple policy classes, graduate level public policy classes at Sac State, because you also sit in on some seminars while doing your fellowship. And that's why it goes just over the academic year. You also get medical, vision, and health, and a monthly stipend.
Okay, thank you, ladies. Yeah, so just to reiterate the steps for the Government Honors Program, if anyone has applied to a government job, they understand it can be an arduous process. Some of the honors programs require you to go through usajobs.com and do that web application that is required, I think, for most government positions. Like you mentioned, a personal statement, resume, letters of recommendation, transcripts, a lot of the stuff that's usually required with job application, and then in addition, these additional essays and such about policy issues or about personal statements. The different requirements will vary for each of the different government agencies. So of course you're going to want to research each particular agency and see what they require, and then tailor your application accordingly. Also, you probably want to be focusing on why you want to work for that particular agency. With a lot of government jobs, they're usually inundated with people applying for them, and so the fellowships as well. So you want to make sure that you really address in your personal statements why that particular agency, why that particular fellowship, why that particular project, and why they would want to work with you. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about resources. As I mentioned, the PSJD website, this is like the first place to go, and it's a plethora of information, and you really want to bookmark it so that you can use it within the fellowship search, but also just if you're into public interest social justice, it's a great resource for students and job seekers. So psjd.org, I believe. We also found a really great resource, the Yale Law School Guide to Postgraduate Fellowships. We're going to pass it around so you guys can see what's in there, and then the actual website to find it. Is it just a link from the slide? Or okay. So we have these slides are posted on the PILCS website, and then this is a link, the Yale Law School Guide. We'll link you to where you can find it through the Yale website. And they just did this amazing guide to fellowships, what to be doing when, what the different kinds are, when you should be starting to apply, like going through the whole process. And the resource is something just way better than we could have created for you. So we think it's the best for all if we just direct you to the best resource that's out there. And what we found was this Yale Law School Guide. Yes?
I just wanted to add, this is not necessarily related, but in terms of like the other fellowships that are available, I know that my year, I graduated in 2010, it was particularly hard to find a public interest job, and you know what? Some of the other students asked Penn to, asked my school to fund them to create public interest fellowships. And I know you mentioned Santa Clara has fellowships with professors, but sometimes it's, they created 3 fellowships that year, and which has now been sustained since 2010, 2011, 2012, which are funded by the law school. So one option is to organize around that. So a lot of people who didn't necessarily have success in the SCAD or the EJW fellowships just ask their law school to do it, and I'm sure the law school will be very happy to organize.
That's a great idea and potentially an advocacy project that we can work on to get some more postgraduate funding. Our website also has a link to a page that just contains a lot of information about fellowships that is really relevant to Santa Clara law, particularly Santa Clara law students. So check out the PILCS website. And then SCU Law Jobs does post fellowships that people bring to our attention. We do post them through SCU Law Jobs. So I'm sure most of you already troll that and keep trolling and looking for fellowships.
There's actually one more site, actually two, that aren't really utilized all that often, but fellowships are sometimes posted on them, and a different variety, including policy-based fellowships, through Government Honors Handbook, but also the Public Policy Handbook that is in Clarinet. So if you go to the Law Career Services Clarinet page and scroll down to the Public Policy Handbook, in there you'll find policy-based, representative-based, and other fellowships and other programs that are similar in design, so you might want to check that out as well.
Okay, so some resources for the Government Honors Program for those of you that are interested in that. The Government Honors and Internship Handbook. This is a really great resource. Where can they find it?
That would be Clarinet as well.
Okay.
So there's Government Honors and Internship Handbook, and the same people that put that out put out the Public Policy Handbook, and it's actually through the University of Arizona.
And that's the website. I mean, as long as you have a login and password, you can either do it through Law Career Services or the website itself.
There is a different password for the Public Policy Handbook, so you would need to go into Clarinet and access that, and it's right in the
And just for your information, this handbook also lists summer fellowships for 1Ls and 2Ls as well. So if you're looking for a summer fellowship position, you can utilize this website as well.
Yeah, so that was again the University of Arizona. Where's the Arizona? This link for an Arizona law school put together a handbook about government honors program that is just so much better than we would have been able to create for you. So we're directing you to the best resource that's out there for information about government honors programs. You could also, they have a Google government search, so you want to search, fellowships, honors programs, these kinds of things. And then just the actual government websites themselves will list the fellowships when they become available. So a more targeted search would just be looking on the websites of the actual agencies that you are interested in applying with. How did you find out about your fellowship?
As I said, I remember hearing about it in college, but most recently a judge I interned for my 1L summer emailed me the brochure for the Judicial Administration Fellowship because he thought I'd be interested in it. And then following that website, I found that they had all these 4 other fellowships, and I thought, oh, well, increase my chances and apply to more than one.
Okay, so I'll just read quickly through the tips that we have sort of created, and then I'll turn it over to our panel speakers to see what additional first-hand tips they have themselves. The first tip is to start thinking about things early. Like we've mentioned, organizations are they're really happy to work with people that they've already worked with. If they know you, if you volunteered with them, if you've interned, externed, you spent the summer with an organization, they'll probably be very willing to work with you for a future fellowship. So start thinking early about what kinds of things you'd like to work on, what organizations you might want to work with, and then volunteer with those organizations or intern with them so you can build these relationships starting as early as possible. And then you want to design your own plan and timeline based on sort of the timeline that we went through as far as when you want to be thinking about the project that you might like to do, when you're going to research, when the actual applications are due, how much time you want to leave. Come up with a game plan, again, like plans A, B, and C, in case you don't get it the first time around. It's not the end. You can then re-go through the process or apply for other fellowships or try and advocate for the school to create a fellowship to fund you for your project. You also want to check in with individuals who have already done it. They can give you some really good tips. And again, if you're interested, check in with myself, Yen, or Anupa, because we do have some resources of students that have gone through the fellowship process and direct you to someone who may be able to help you answer some of your questions. Building relationships, this is, with sometimes professors, we'll have worked with organizations, volunteering, that kind of stuff. Really getting out into the area that is working where you might be interested and getting to know who's doing work in that area so that you can hopefully see what's already out there, what interests are being served, and see what's not so that you can fill a niche. And then searching PSJD and seeing what kind of stuff is out there just through internet searching, and then talking to people and networking and seeing what's available. But yeah, I think most importantly is kind of, like networking, as they always say, but talking to people who are in the field, because they can let you know their own personal ideas about projects that they think are great ideas that you may then be able to take and run with. Or if they know of attorneys or organizations that are looking to fund a certain project, that may be a really good opportunity for you to kind of step in if your interests are in line with that. So, ladies, do you have any tips that you'd like to offer, perhaps, about the fellowship process or search?
Things that come to mind, also consider the benefits of that fellowship. I know that the ones I've applied to are not so much directly related. Maybe I'm going to find out what they end up having, but I know that there'll be networking opportunities at the state capitol. I have some friends from college who did this after college. They're still at the capitol because their fellowship led to employment, and they're working their way up there. A lot of the people who've done this fellowship in the past got placements in other government offices, or they got placements in afterwards with judicial clerkships at the federal level or higher state levels. So the fellowship itself, consider as you're looking how it is a stepping stone to other things.
I guess one of the things that comes to mind is I realize there's like a rush or a desperation for wanting a job throughout the year, but I do think that sometimes your resources are better spent if you target your applications to, really, this is self-assessment. I mean, I think that's like a pretty technical term, but you kind of know what you're interested in doing, and applying for a broad range of jobs is good in one sense, but it's also, if you're going so afield, it's sort of a waste of time for both you and the person reading your application, because it's going to be very obvious that you don't have the experience necessary for that area of law. So I would really take the time in that, maybe, I'm going to call self-assessment because that's the term, but I really, just target, I would just say targeting your applications is really just, it makes it easier to write the application, it just makes it easier for the organization to pick you, it makes it really obvious that you stick out. Something that I already hit on was, again, rely on your law school to help you out, and that's not just the public interest center, but like also the professors, and when I was in my fellowships, I had no idea what organization I wanted to work for, and I stopped by Philadelphia and I asked the dean of public interest. She was like, oh, the executive director of this employment law center that they have in the Bay Area came and spoke at the law school, so maybe you should contact her, which is really just totally random and ended up working. So as much as you can, I hate to say public interest because networking seems like it should be a firm thing to do, but it really is quite important for public interest as well. And number 3, I guess I would say, the reapplying, rejection is not failure. I get rejected all the time, and I ask a lot of things that a lot of people tell me that's completely crazy. I'm pretty sure one of the organization, I'm pretty sure one of my first conversations with somebody, and I will not name names, I'm pretty sure she hung up on me. I'm not exactly, but I'm still there, and we've never really discussed the fact that she might have hung up on me. And she's perfectly very nice to me now, but the moment of is take that to heart. If you have a bad day in applying, that someday it might turn So those are my 3 summations. I'm happy to take questions if that's, or
Yeah, no, I think at this point we'd like to open it up for questions if anyone has any questions about the process. Yeah.
Could you tell us what your project proposal was?
Sure. That's another interesting, okay, well, I will tell you what my project proposal was and then I will segue into project proposals in general. My project proposal is working with limited English proficient workers, so immigrant workers. I did Peace Corps before law school, so I wanted to work it with mostly Spanish-speaking workers, but you know, I have some Chinese language ability, so I wanted to work with doing discrimination work. That said, I had no background in discrimination work. Before that, I had done wage and hour stuff, which sounds similar. You're serving the same clients, but the law is completely different. In terms of projects, yes, it is really important to come up with a good project, but again, like I was saying earlier, once the funding is given to you, it is given to you. If you end up being like, actually, you know, this is not really a problem that I am facing, there's really a lot of flexibility. And I think you should really think of applying for the fellowships as like the organization, either SCAD or EJW, putting their faith in you that you will do good work, period. So yes, they're going to make you go through hoops and like come up with a project. And I actually am working pretty closely with the project that I developed, but part of that project proposal was made with my organization, which already has expertise in discrimination work. So it was really helpful that my organization could work with me in making that project. Because you know, honestly, I would have had a hard time coming up with something like, how about I love immigrant workers? Is that a project? Not really.
Any other questions?
You know, one thing that I'd like to add too is that just make sure you're budgeting your time, and it's really never too early for the first years that may be in the crowd to start thinking about this and planning it, regardless of the type of fellowship that you're targeting. Because as I think both of you probably attest to, it's a very time-intensive process, and some of them can have multiple layers, if you will. So make sure you're thinking about everything. Probably, I would say upwards of 6 to 8 months at least in advance. So when you think about that, you know, you really are starting about a year earlier than what you would be necessarily applying for. So keep that in mind in your overall strategy.
I'll add that there are fellowships during law school over the summers. They're not all postgraduate. So if they're, you know, a place that you're interested in ending up somewhere, check and see if they take summer fellows.
Yeah, and I agree with the idea that you're really starting your fellowship application 1L year. That does not meant to like scare all the 1Ls. It's just meant to say what you're probably going to do what you're interested in, which is going to form the basis of your fellowship application. So do what you're interested in.